Hideout of the Celestial Mages. Inside the grand and ominous castle, there is a large table where 4 individuals are sitting. They are Tyra, Zorki, Lauder, and Brajin, eagerly awaiting someone. The one they have been waiting for finally arrives in the grand hall through a teleportation seal, which disappears after teleporting the recently arrived mage. After finally appearing, he begins to walk towards his companions. Tyra anxiously comments on his arrival, complaining that it has been a while since he sent Hiru's cocoon through the teleportation seal. She is certainly referring to what Odisu did in chapter 14 when he threw the magic card into Hiru's cocoon, causing it to disappear. Apparently, the seal teleported the cocoon directly to their hideout. After making this observation, Tyra asks if Odisu took all that time to confront that rookie god. Rajan says that due to the concealment seals placed by the hideout, they couldn't sense Odisu's energy, so they were completely blind there. This means that the mages placed a magic spell in that place that is hiding them. In other words, no one can find them there, but they also cannot know what is happening in the outside world unless they leave the hideout. So even though the battle between Goku and Odisu is being felt by people in all universes, the mages felt nothing. Odisu asks his companions the reason for all that anxiety and asks if they doubted his victory, but at that moment he notices someone behind him and is startled by it. It's Calamore, who tells him to stop being conceited since his appearance suggests that it wasn't as easy a battle as he wants to make it seem. Seeing who was there, Odisu immediately bows respectfully and says that it is an honor to have one of the remaining parts of the Supreme Lord Zarat with them. But Calamore wants to skip the formalities and tell Odisu to just tell his companions what they want to know. He tells Odisu not to bother him since he's just looking for a place to settle there. As the primordial beast moves away, Odisu does as he asks and recounts what's happened, saying that indeed he took longer than he should have, partly because Goku was hesitant to unleash his true power, and he had to force him to do so. But the main reason was that he got too involved in the fight and let things drag on for too long. Zorki comments that this is unusual. It's hard to believe that Odisu of all people wanted to prolong a fight. Generally, he is the cautious type who likes to end a battle as quickly as possible. The leader of the mages agrees but explains that apparently being hosted in this Saiyan's body brought some eccentric behaviors to him. While he was fighting Goku, he felt an inexplicable pleasure, and even though he tried to control it, he ended up going a bit overboard. Lauder, the mage in Terran's body, understands what Odisu is feeling and tells him that he also went through a similar situation. When he faced Beerus face to face, he felt some feelings from this man named Terran, even if only a little. After Lauder tells his experience, Odisu floats towards the table while observing that behind the power limitations, they have other types of difficulties with these bodies. In the upcoming 6 months, they must work on strengthening both their bodies and their minds. When they achieve full adaptation of these bodies, nothing will stop them. Suddenly, a burst of magical light occurs, and then a throne appears. The one responsible for this is Calamore, who simply throws himself onto the throne while complaining that there is no better place in this damn hideout. And finally, he says that they can only wait. After the warriors of Earth gather at Kami-sama's temple at Dende's request, Beerus explains the whole situation to them. The god of destruction finishes his explanation, saying that this is everything that happened, or at least everything he knows. Gohan asks if Beerus thinks that these enemies called Celestial Mages can attack Earth. Beerus looks directly at him to respond and says that it's possible, since the leader of the Celestial Guardians named Paikon said that after the Tournament of Power, Universe 7 gained a lot of attention. So it's possible that this universe is seen as a threat and becomes a target, especially for the fighters who participated on Universe 7's team in the tournament. Kuririn nearly wets himself when he hears this and asks what someone like him can do against enemies who can fight against gods of destruction. But Piccolo reassures him and says that if these guys are really strong, they wouldn't bother fighting directly against people like them. He deduces that what Beerus means is that the mages may send servants for them to face. Beerus confirms this and says that Paikon mentioned that in the past, these mages caused a great war in the universe, and he believes that mortals will be involved in some way. That's why he decided to warn them. Tien says that they will give their all in training to protect Earth, just as they have always done. Now that Goku and Vegeta are not there, they need to exert much more effort. Gohan agrees and says that he will also do his best to become stronger than ever. Suddenly, someone arrives on the planet using instant transmission. It's the Supreme Kai, Shin. Seeing his counterpart arrive, Beerus knows it's time to go and informs everyone that he has said everything he needed to say. He mentions that he would have liked to speak with everyone present, but it doesn't seem easy for them to gather everyone. Kuririn apologizes and says that Android 18 wanted to stay home taking care of their sick daughter, and Android 17 is looking after the island as usual. Tien says that Chaozu is taking care of their dojo, and Gohan says that Goten and Trunks are at school. He mentions that they can be very useful, but convincing Bulma and Chi-Chi to let them participate in all of this is the hardest part. Beerus starts to leave and says that it's a matter for them to take care of, and he walks away alongside Shin. The Supreme Kai informs that he is already out of danger, referring to someone we don't know. Beerus says that he didn't ask that, and that Shin shouldn't say things he didn't ask. The God of Creation apologizes for that, and asks if they should return to their planet. Beerus says yes, but they should take a few people with them. The God of Destruction looks at Majin Buu and says that he should go with them. This obviously leaves Buu a little confused. Looking in another direction, Beerus says that he should go also. The direction Beerus is looking at is one of the rooms in the temple, and in that place is Oob resting on a bed, being observed by Mr. Popo, who looks tensely at the sleeping child. Universe 7's planet of destruction. Kibito is kneeling on the planet's grass, very out of breath. He observes the arrival of some people who are Beerus, Shin, Oob, and Majin Buu. Shin asks Beerus what he will say to Oob when the boy wakes up, and Beerus responds that he doesn't have the patience for brats, so he'll keep him unconscious for some time. But while he doesn't have to deal with Oob, he has to deal with Buu, who has barely arrived and is already demanding the food Beerus promised. Beerus tells him to wait a little, as he's not starving at all. In his thoughts, Beerus remembers that he had to promise a lot of food for Buu to agree to go with him, and then he had to offer double to prevent him from bringing a guy named Satan and a dog. He concludes that he'll have to ask Whis to go to Bulma's house later to restock the supplies. But now Beerus focuses his attention on Kibito, asking why he's so exhausted. Kibito explains that that guy was so injured and depleted of energy that in order to heal his wounds and give him enough energy to stay safe, he had to give it his all. Turning his gaze to Vegeta, Beerus sees his deep in thought at the edge of a hill, looking up at the sky, and then asks Kibito what happened to him. Vegeta ignores everyone's presence, silently staring fixedly at the sky. Kibito explains that when he started healing Vegeta, he woke up. At that moment, he felt the monstrous ki from Goku's fight with his enemy. After that, he went to that place and has been there ever since. Beerus asks if they found the person who was fighting Vegeta. Shin replies that they didn't, and explains that they didn't even worry too much about it, as they had to hurry to save Vegeta. But he assures that if Vegeta's adversary had been there, they would have found him. Beerus wonders if Frieza had anything to do with the disappearance of that guy. And speaking of the Emperor, his ships are floating in space, surely searching for something. Frieza is in his room on the main ship, looking pensively out the window. Barry Blue enters the room and informs him that they haven't found Lord Cooler or Vegeta. Frieza wonders how they disappeared like that, and he wonders if the man who took Janemba has something to do with it, referring to Pikkon. The image of Cooler comes to his mind, leaving Frieza very irritated and causing him to curse his brother. He promises that he will never allow his brother to surpass him again. In the Fortress of the Celestial Guardians, the three Guardians are in the middle of a meeting. Pikkon is briefing the other Guardians on the report given by the Grand Priest, and summarizing everything. The Angel of Universe 6 reported that the primordial beast Hiru was taken by Odisu. It was reported by Universe 8 that Hatch was taken by Tyra, and Universe 11 reported that Calamore fled with Zorky willingly. Pikkon says that fortunately they managed to recover Janemba and the dormant part of Majin Buu, but it's undeniable that the Celestial Mages had the upper hand this time. The Saiyan Guardian is completely furious with this report, saying it's a catastrophe. In such a short time, the Mages destroyed the Super Dragon Balls, kidnapped Zeno, and took 3 out of the 5 great primordial beasts. He says that they have utterly failed, or rather, Pikkon has utterly failed. He led them to defeat. But the Angel Guardian seems much calmer and understanding, telling the Saiyan that blaming the Master won't help, and that they now need to think of solutions instead of making accusations. Pikkon says that Endor is right, and says that if they want a chance of victory, they need to start acting immediately. The Saiyan Guardian asks the Master for his suggestions for action, and Pikkon says that first of all, he will meet again with the gods of the Zeno's realm to properly clarify the entire situation. And also, even though he doesn't want to do it, he will need to rely on mortals. The Angel Guardian named Endor asks if the Master is referring to that. Pikkon confirms, saying that's exactly it. He says his journey in search of the knowledge of the Great Zalama will finally prove useful, but for that, he will need the most powerful mortal of the race descended from the Supreme Deity. The Saiyan Guardian says that if they are going to use mortals, he also wants one. He says that Pikkon already knows who it is. It's that boy. The Master Guardian sighs and then agrees. Universe 6's planet of destruction. Goku is unconscious in his bed, but suddenly wakes up in a startle and immediately looks at his abdomen, where he has suffered a mortal wound. But that wound is no longer there, which surprises Goku a bit. Beside the bed is Lei, who reassures him and says that he is safe now. Goku is surprised to see Lei there and asks where they are and where Odisu is, but it's Vados who responds, standing on the other side of the room. She says he's been gone for a few hours now. Goku becomes very frustrated and says that he couldn't do anything against that guy. He turns to Lei and apologizes for not being able to fulfill his promise to avenge Mr. Kiboru, but Lei doesn't seem concerned about that. After displaying a gentle and resigned smile, she says it's all right and that he did his best. Besides, she can't complain about anything since she was utterly useless. She says that if she had followed Kiboru's instructions without questioning, maybe he would still be alive, and in the end she couldn't do anything against that villain either. Goku hangs his head and says that they are failures as gods. Vados interjects in the conversation and says that in her opinion, feeling sorry for themselves won't help at all. She says that as gods, their job is to protect Universe 6 and work for its balance. Did they fail today? Yes, they did. But there's still an entire universe that depends on their care. And if they don't do anything for the universe, no one will. She concludes her little speech by saying that they have already failed once and asks them not to fail again. In an incredible way, Vados' brief speech is enough to astonishingly motivate Lei. She says that Kiboru would surely tell her to keep learning and working. So she will work hard and do it for the universe and for Mr. Kiboru. Goku is surprised by this and comments that Lei is a very spirited person. But her joy seems to infect the Hakai, who says that he won't accept this defeat and will train hard to not lose to Odisu next time. And Goku's genuine smile is proof that he truly believes in what he's saying. The two gods clap their hands together in a gesture of friendship and camaraderie, and they let out an excited shout as if they were truly a team. Even Vados can't believe that just what she said was enough to motivate them in this way. She's glad that they are very positive people. But the moment is interrupted when the Angel staff gives an alert. She calls for Goku and Lei, saying that another meeting has been called, and this time they have all been summoned. Of course, Goku and Lei are surprised and tense about it. In the place of the supreme deity of the 12 universes, all the gods of destruction, gods of creation, the angels, all gathered. Also present were Pikkon and Daishinken, the Zenos and their bodyguards. Speaking is Daishinken, who is summarizing the situation for everyone present at the meeting, explaining the final outcomes of the clash between them and the celestial mages. The high priest snaps his fingers and a hologram is created in the center of the corridor, showing the figure of Brajin and her chimera. Daishinken says that this is Brajin, the great seal mage, and she kidnapped Zeno, the all-knowing being living in Universe 7, Hellas, the Kaioshin, and the angel next to her gaze at the face. Perhaps the goddess who is fascinated by beauty may be wondering how such an ugly woman can exist. But well, who knows? Next, Daishinken talks about Lauder, the great seal mage who tried to kidnap the two already released parts of Majin Buu's power. But Beerus stopped him. Daishinken also shows everyone the image of Lauder holding one of his magical seals in his hand. Then he speaks of Zorki, the great illusion mage who led the primordial beast Calamore out of Universe 11. Next is Tyra, the great warrior mage who took the cocoon of the primordial beast called Hatch from Likir. And finally, he speaks of Odisu, the great mage of elements, who took the cocoon of the primordial beast called Hiru from Son Goku. And not less important, the High Priest reminds that they destroyed the Super Dragon Balls, showing the destruction of the orbs through his hologram. But after reporting so many negative moments, he gives the good news and says that not everything was defeated. The Celestial Guardians managed to recover Janemba's cocoon, a feat accomplished by Pikkon. And they also have in their possession the cocoon with Majin Buu's original power, a task fulfilled by the Guardian called Endor. Also, as he had already mentioned, Beerus managed to prevent the already released power of Majin Buu from falling into the hands of the mages. At that moment, he shows Beerus preventing Lauder from taking Oob on Earth. Beerus smiles proudly at his own feat and throws it in the faces of his colleagues that despite always being the most criticized among them, he was the only god who performed his task well. This statement annoys Belmod and Likir and leaves Goku very frustrated. One thing they have in common is that all three failed to prevent the celestial mages from capturing the primordial beasts in their universes. Daishinken says that now that the complete report of the facts have been given, he thinks everyone should better understand the situation. So Mr. Pikkon is there to clarify any doubts they may have. Pikkon makes himself available to the gods, saying he will do his best to inform them in the best possible way. Iwan from Universe 1 is the first to ask, wanting to know how the celestial mages ended up freeing themselves since the celestial guardians kept them imprisoned for countless years. He wants to know why this happened only now. Jin from Universe 12 adds to his colleague's question, recalling that in their first meeting, Paikon mentioned that the Guardians were caught in a moment of weakness, and he wants to know what that means. Paikon says that for them to fully understand the situation, he must first explain how the sealing of the Celestial Mages happened. He recounts that many years ago, the Celestial Mages violently attacked the realm of Zeno, with the goal of obtaining the cocoons of the 5 great primordial beasts. The gods of that time united to try to stop the mages, but they had great difficulty because the mages were extremely hard to defeat, both due to their great raw power and their extremely challenging magical tricks. Seeing no other option, he, who was the god of destruction of Universe 7, managed to use an advanced sealing technique on them, and in exchange for all his life energy, he succeeded in sealing the mages. However, as they all should know, sealing techniques normally require a container, where the sealed entity remains contained. In this case, to imprison beings as powerful as the Celestial Mages, they used an extremely powerful magical container. This container is a box created by the power of the Super Dragon Balls. This box was called the Sealing Box, an extremely resistant magical container. Paikon explains that by using the Sealing Box, he managed to imprison the mages with his technique, and thus the realm of Xenos was rid of this great threat. After hearing this part of the history, Goku calls on Paikon to clarify a doubt. He asks why. Since they were using the Super Dragon Balls to defeat the mages, they didn't simply ask Super Shenron to make the mages disappear forever, or something like that. If they had done that, things would have been much simpler. Paikon says that it wouldn't be possible, and Goku asks why not, since Super Shenron can do anything. Paikon says that it's true that Super Shenron can do anything, but he explains that there are rules for using the Super Dragon Balls. He says he won't go into too many details because that's not the focus of the meeting. But in summary, since the power of the Super Dragon Balls was used to seal Zarat, it is completely forbidden by Zalama, the creator of the Super Dragon Balls, for the orbs to be used for requests that directly involve beings from another realm. Goku is left with even more doubts and asks what Paikon means by that. The Master Guardian responds by explaining that, simply put, since Zarat was defeated, the Super Dragon Balls no longer have direct power over beings or locations from other realms. This means that Super Shenron can create, alter, or destroy anything that belongs to the realm of Zeno, but cannot directly affect anything belonging to another realm. Paikon explains that because of this rule, they could not use the Super Dragon Balls to directly seal the mages, kill them, or anything of the sort. So that's why they asked Super Shenron to create a powerful container that they knew would be able to seal the mages. Vados calls out Goku and promises to explain more to him later about how these rules involving the Super Dragon Balls work. But for now, they should let Mr. Paikon continue with what he was saying. Basically, this is Vados' polite way of telling Goku to shut up and stop asking things that have nothing to do with the subject of the meeting. After receiving this polite and discreet reprimand from Miss Vados, Goku agrees with her, and then Paikon continues the history by explaining that the sealing box fulfilled its role in containing the Celestial Mages. But the problem was that their power was so great that it kept the box under constant pressure. As time passed, the box was constantly losing power. He explains that when they made the request to Super Shenron, they did not imagine that the mages would exert so much pressure on the box, to the point of wearing it out. So they didn't ask for an object of infinite energy. But Goku has the solution for everything, right? So he gives a solution, saying it's easy. And all they need to do was ask Super Shenron to grant infinite energy to the sealing box. While Goku suggests this, Shin beside him becomes a little impatient. But once again, Paikon dismisses Goku's solution, saying unfortunately it wasn't possible. This saddens Goku, who complains about not being able to come up with a single solution. Then Paikon explains why, and says there are 2 reasons why Goku's suggested solution is not possible. The first reason is that once the Celestial Mages were already sealed inside the sealing box, any request they made involving the box would be something done directly against the mages, so Super Shenron wouldn't grant that wish. And the second reason is that after the Celestial Mages were sealed, the sealing box became a relic of the Celestial Guardians, and those who live in the Celestial world don't belong to any of the realms. Just like a wish made to the Super Dragon Balls cannot affect them in any way, they also cannot use the orbs or directly benefit from them. Paikon concludes by saying that the orbs only work exclusively in the realm of Zeno and for the realm of Zeno. Goku asks what they did then if that's the case. Paikon says they, the Guardians, created a second magical object, the battery box. He explains that this is a special box energized by their power, which was inserted into the sealing box. When the battery box filled with power was inserted into the sealing box, it renewed its power and kept it functioning regularly for thousands of years. But unfortunately, there came a time when the battery box discharged, and when that happened, almost all the Celestial Guardians who were, by rule, very powerful gods gathered to recharge it. But this recharging process demanded a lot of power from those who participated and took days for them to fully recover. In other words, whenever the battery box was recharged, the Celestial Guardians became very weakened. Hellas observed that if there was an ideal moment to attack the Celestial Guardians, it was that moment, taking advantage of their weakness. Paikon agrees but says they took some precautions to mitigate this fragility. First, not all the Celestial Guardians participated in the ritual, and the goal was to have some of them retain their full power. And another security measure they took was that no one besides the Celestial Guardians themselves knew the day and time of the ritual. After these explanations, Quaitella can only conclude that the only way for the Celestial Guardians to be attacked at this moment of weakness would be if there was a traitor among them. Paikon agrees and then says the attacker initiated the attack just when the Guardians were weakened. His intention was not to allow the battery box to be inserted into the sealing box, because if that happened, the battery box would be fixed to the sealing box in such a way that it would be impossible to remove it before it discharged again. All evidence indicates that there was a great battle in the Celestial Fortress, and Anzen, the master of the Guardians, came very close to completing the mission, but unfortunately he was killed just before that. Hearing this, Romshi notices something and comments that the way Paikon speaks, it seems like he wasn't there at the time of the attack. Paikon says he wasn't actually. He and two other Guardians who didn't participate in the ritual were outside the fortress at the time of the attack, fulfilling other missions. They were the only surviving Guardians. Moscow says something that is incomprehensible to everyone except for his Kaioshin and his angel, and the angel translates the Destroyer's speech, saying that Universe 3's God of Destruction finds it strange that they were outside the fortress at the time of the attack. Moscow thinks it's too much of a coincidence. He also asks if they already know who was the Guardian responsible for this betrayal. In response to the first question, Paikon says that he and the other two Guardians who didn't participate in the ritual being outside at the time of the attack was not a coincidence. He explains that by tradition, 4 Guardians do not participate in the ritual, meaning 4 of them retain their full power. But just before the ritual took place, coincidentally, 3 emergency missions emerged, and 3 of them had to leave the fortress. Sidra already knows how this history will end, and deduces that the 4th Guardian, who was the only one who remained in the fortress, was the traitor. Paikon confirms the suspicion of Universe 9's Hakaishin, and then also responding to Moscow's second question, says that all the gods who live in the celestial world, including the Celestial Guardians, originate from all 7 realms. He, for example, was born in the realm of Zeno. This other Guardian, on the other hand, was born in the realm of Zarat. Arak asks if Paikon is joking. How could they have allowed the Guardian most interested in freeing the Celestial Mages and Zarat to retain full power? Paikon acknowledges that this decision is a bit absurd and says that he himself wouldn't do such a thing. But he explains that Master Anzen was a man of pure heart and trusted his subordinates very much. He also says that it was a bit difficult to suspect the Guardian since he was particularly devoted to their cause and had served as a Guardian for hundreds of thousands of years. Obviously, after serving so devotedly for many years, he naturally gained the trust of Master Anzen and the other Guardians, so it probably didn't even cross Anzen's mind that the man could betray them. Now, Likir questions, asking if this man alone was able to defeat all the Guardians. He says he understands that when the Guardians recharge the battery box, they become weakened, but Universe 8's Hakaishin has difficulty believing that the weakening was that significant. Paikon understands Likir's incredulity and agrees, saying he also finds it difficult to believe that a single Guardian could defeat all the others alone, even with reduced power. Paikon says they are still investigating how exactly the traitor achieved this feat, but he says if he were to go into that kind of detail now, it would take a lot of time in the meeting, and it would also be a waste of time, since they don't have a definite answer for anything, just a hypothesis. Paikon asks the gods to allow him to give his opinion, and then suggests they skip this part, where they'll be making deductions and go straight to the part where they have the right answers. But Likir doesn't agree with that, and he makes it very clear while looking at the Master of the Guardians with a suspicious glance. He says that contrary to what Paikon is suggesting he would like to hear more about the internal investigations of the Celestial Guardians. Apparently, Likir likes to know things in great detail, which is expected of a god who has an exemplary job like him. However, it seems that the Supreme Gods are not as meticulous as Likir, and one of them says that this conversation is very boring, and he doesn't want to prolong it more than necessary. The other Zeno agrees and orders them to only speak about what is important. Likir's fur stands on end with fear for suggesting something that goes against the will of the Supreme Gods, so he immediately apologizes for his suggestion. But besides Likir, there is another person who seems a little suspicious of this whole situation, and that person is Beerus, who is in a terrible mood. Beerus says he has a relevant question to ask. Why did the mage who went to planet Earth have the appearance of Taron? And not only that, the mage seemed to have some memories about him. Beerus recalls the conversation he had with Paikon when they had left the meeting of the Hakaishans and were on the way of his planet. He remembers that Paikon had told him that Taron had died during the attack that the Guardians suffered, and asked how the Master Guardian explains this. Then Beerus makes it very clear that he never liked Paikon from the beginning, so he better give an explanation that satisfies him about why he wasn't informed about an enemy who has the memories and body of his master. And while demonstrating an even more serious and aggressive behavior, Beerus exclaims that if Paikon doesn't do it, he will make him pay. After all the confusion that happened, the gods are finally receiving a proper explanation of how things got to this point. But the more Paikon explains the situation, the more doubts and questions arise. After all, why didn't Paikon tell Beerus about the enemy using his master's body? Why are the mages using the bodies of the Guardians like Taron, Anzen, and that fat guy? Many answers are yet to be given, and we will find out all of this in the upcoming chapters of Dragon Ball Hakai.